us. We will be recording this session. Just wanted to go ahead and let you all know. It's
hosted by the Latinos, the Latino Club.
Just a few housekeeping rules as we let folks in. If you have any questions,
that's something different.
You can go ahead and definitely put it in the chat. But in meanwhile, as we start, if you can just go ahead and place yourself on mute. And then if you have any questions, again, just feel free to add them in the chat. And we will be starting shortly. But thank you again for everyone for joining us. Alrighty, folks. Well, I do want to respect your time for being prompt. So first and foremost, again, welcome to Cal Poly Pomona's, event that we're hosting today for y'all. I want to go ahead and first introduce myself. My name is Cynthia Tejeda-Avina. I am the Latino Professional Alumni Chapter President. And so we definitely want to welcome y'all for joining us to this workshop. Before we go ahead and get started, we do want to go ahead and do a land acknowledgement. So we want to recognize the Gabrielino Tonga people as the original caretakers of this land. We are grateful to work as guests here in what is today Los Angeles County, the traditional, ancestral, and ascended territory of the Gabrielino and Tonga. We ask that each tread lightly, humbly, and with open hearts. We pay our respects to the Gabrielino Tonga people, our ancestors, elders, and all of the relations past, present, and emerging. And if you want to take a look at the original caretakers, there is a link here that you can go ahead and take a photo. I'll go ahead and provide it in the chat, and then you can definitely place your zip code to see where the land you kind of fall in. Next slide. And so today we have the great pleasure of Talia Bombale. She's going to go ahead and provide, great resources and great insight on definitely a topic that is, I feel, very necessary, especially during the pandemic, transitioning to what's going to be the new normal. And so I definitely want to give her enough time and to go ahead and provide those resources over to us. Talia is the CEO, owner, founder of Newport Counseling Center for Individuals, Couples, and Family Therapy Incorporated, and Coaching with Talia. And so I definitely want to give her the time and thank you again for joining us and providing such a crucial topic to our community.
Thank you. I'm really excited. All right, so I'm going to share my presentation, and if any of you have questions along the way, the best way for us to do this is chat them in, and then at the end I will answer any of the questions that you have and open it up for more Q&A at the end. So I will keep an eye on the chat afterwards. All right, let's get started. So today my objectives are to teach all of you the different types of stress. There's actually two different kinds that, unless we know about them, we can get them mixed up. And when we get them mixed up, it can be difficult to know which coping skills to use. So that's an important foundation to come from. We'll also talk about how stress affects your body, managing stress skills, signs and warning signs of burnout, as well as how to treat and prevent burnout from coming back in the future. And then, like I said, we'll end with a Q&A. So learning to cope, as we all know, being this many years into a pandemic, learning to cope with stress is something I don't think we were very well prepared for prior to this global level, at least not in some time. So learning to cope with stress is an essential part of maintaining your wellness. Stress has both positive and negative effects. So the examples that I will give in just a couple of slides delineate the difference between eustress and distress. And I know they sound like funny words, so I will do my best to explain them in a way that you can keep them memorized and organized in your mind. As I like to tell my clients and people that I work with, either we control our stress or it controls us. Obviously, when it comes to something like a global scale pandemic, there are external stressors that are out of our control, but our responsibility and our ability to manage our own individual reaction to it is something that we can learn how to do. It's a learned skill. Some sources of stress can include environmental and psychological sources. If you have a tough day at work, if you are having a conflict with your romantic partner, if you live at home with your family or you had to move back home with them during the pandemic, anything like that would be an example of a stressor. Stress can also come from a frustration of feeling like your goals that you are setting and trying to attain for yourself have been blocked. And that was the cause of a lot of people's stress during the pandemic when jobs changed, housing changed, and everything became uncertain. We didn't have an ability to meet a lot of those goals, and it wasn't our fault. And that's the hardest thing for us psychologically as human beings, is journeying through and coping with a situation that we didn't cause. We're not really prepared for that. Even if we were taught emotional regulation skills growing up, I was not. I don't know if any of you were, but even if we were, this is not something that any of us could have prepared for. So when we're taking a look at the sources of stress, there are two different kinds. We have eustress and distress. Eustress is something that is positive, it's energizing, it's generally short term, it doesn't last for a very long time, and it can improve our performance. So if you found out that you were going to go to Disneyland or on a vacation, that's an exciting experience, hopefully. However, it is going to cause some stress. Do I have to move work? What am I going to pack? What am I going to wear? We might not think of that as stress, but our nervous system is what is recognizing those events as stress. It's believed that we can use coping skills to manage this, and our time management and emotional regulation skills. So it's more something that we look forward to and less something that's external that we didn't plan for. That's what distress is. Distress is what we commonly experience when something is out of our control, when we didn't plan for something, and when it was potentially worse than what we had expected or had been told, right? Like the first couple of weeks that we thought it was only going to last a couple of weeks during the pandemic, a lot of us didn't understand what that amount of chronic stress was going to put on our nervous system, and not knowing when it's going to end is something that is very distressing and was for definitely the first year of the pandemic. Generally, it feels unpleasant. It depletes your energy. You're not going to have energy left at the end of the day to be a human being. As I like to say, this can be short or long-term distress. It depends on the situation. Outside coping mechanisms are something we try and use, especially if it's something that we can't handle. But many of us had those coping skills stripped away during the pandemic when gyms closed, depending on the county you lived in, restaurants closed, the ability to walk outside was taken away for some people. There's health concerns per family, there's cultural concerns per family. It was a very distressing time and still continues to be for many people. Chronic distress can lead to physical illness, mental fatigue, and emotional depletion. Many of us have been past that point for quite some time. So today I really hope to highlight what are these effects that you can manage and keep an eye out for, and then the skills, using confidence and assertiveness skills to be able to set boundaries around your time and manage other people's reactions to what you might not want to do anymore and what might be depleting to you. So this is just another way I like to try and complement everyone's learning style. This is an example of a visual where if we have too little stimulation or motivation, how efficient we are at our behavior, we might be confused or bored. We're not being very stimulated, and we're not going to be as effective at what we need to do. That middle ground where we're really motivated, not too much, but pretty motivated, and we have good efficiency. This is when we have focused attention, we're emotionally balanced, and we're using our rational thinking skills. So this would be, you have the best meal, you have a good night's sleep, and you're really focused and able to do what you need to for work. Like during COVID, if you were able to go into your office and focus, much different performance than the original work from home life. And then we see on the other end of the spectrum, if you have far too much motive or far too much stimulation, it's too much in your environment and your nervous system, and you have a very high level of efficiency, it's going to put a lot of pressure on you. The work output expectation is far too high for your nervous system, and you're going to have issues with focus. You could become very excitable, but you could also end up burning out if you take too much on your plate. So the 3 different kinds of stress that I will briefly review, you'll have all these slides, by the way, to keep and reference. So if I go through anything quicker than you would have hoped, you can keep them as reference, and I'm happy to go back at the end and answer any questions. Acute stress is a reaction when symptoms develop due to a particularly stressful event. This could be something like a car accident, you almost got hit by a car, or your car almost got hit by a car, you dropped your phone in water and weren't expecting it. I mean, people define stress or little t trauma in various ways. So this is thinking of it as like it's an acute stress incident. It's probably a one-time experience. The word acute means the symptoms develop quickly, but don't usually last very long. Symptoms of these stressors include irritability, anxiety, headaches, back pain, and gut problems. Your nervous system is very connected psychosomatically, so your acute stress response is likely going to flare up if you have a test, if you're waiting for an important event, if you have something that you're really looking forward to that is in the future, and it's not one of the eustress categories, it's something that's distressing you, a talk with your boss that you're dreading, your partner coming home and you kind of left on bad terms in the morning and you don't know if they're going to continue the fight. These examples would be more of an acute stress. This may extend because our minds like to play tricks on us. We might replay a recent argument in our head, try and win it in the shower. It might be keeping you up at night, or you might be worrying about a detail in the future that you may need to attend to, or a deadline for work. So acute stress is more manageable with its symptoms because the stressor, when it ends, usually the symptoms go away. So that's acute stress. Episodic acute stress occurs when you get frequent bouts of acute stress. So this would be like every month you have deadlines to meet for work, or every morning you have to drop your kids off at a certain time. You get to define, based on your own life, what type of stress you're experiencing, and that helps you to guide yourself to the best coping skills, which you will have all at the end of the presentation. People with this kind of stress will oftentimes take on more responsibilities and projects than they can handle. And sometimes it's not about the handling of them, it's they're tasked with too many responsibilities and they actually don't have the ability to outsource it. So if we have single parenting, or if we have other chronic stressors like during COVID when people lost their jobs and they were taking on multiple roles, you can't necessarily control the episodic acute stress. So you might seem like you're constantly in a rush, you're always running late, you have so much on your plate that you can't focus. Those are usually the warning signs I see when people are in my office. A pattern of acute stress that's episodic can wear on you over time. The risk that you turn to more unhealthy coping skills is much higher if this is a recurring pattern in your life. So if it goes continually unmanaged and the poor coping skills are continuing to be engaged in, long-term episodic acute stress that isn't properly managed can lead to depression or depressive-like symptoms, as well as anxiety. It's definitely something to treat and keep an eye out for. And if you are going through that, hopefully this presentation today will help at least get you started. Welcome to COVID at this many years in. Chronic stress is something we can all relate to, unfortunately. This is the grinding stress that wears us down over the years. It's been a very long 2 weeks, as one of my clients said. It arises from serious life problems that may be fundamentally beyond our control, such as this pandemic. The demands are unrelenting and you don't really know when it's going to let up. You get by, hopefully, day by day, sometimes hour by hour. Whether the cause lies in the mindset or difficult circumstances, you are going to feel motivated at times to fight for change and change what your environment is like, and other times feel depleted because sometimes we actually can't change the system that we're in. So it's important to get all the help you can and not blame yourself. And a few of the skills that I'll teach you all later will help you to have a more positive mindset, even when times are tough. So those are the 3 kinds of stress that you might be experiencing at any point in your life. And if you've been out of one of these phases, it's important to keep an eye out for any warning signs you might be going back into it. And everybody's body varies in that. These are some of the constructive responses that people can have to stress. You can confront the problem directly. Let's say it's the conversation that you're dreading with your boss. I actually am going to teach you how to set and enforce a boundary later on in this presentation. You can accurately and realistically appraise a stressful situation. There's a skill called checking the facts, which I will teach you all later. You can be more conscientious about reducing your stress, making sure you get a good night's sleep, including movement in your body and healthy food on a daily basis. And you can also learn to recognize and manage where your stress comes from. So if waking up a little bit later is something available to you and it helps you set up yourself for success for the day, small tweaks like that can have a huge response on stress reduction. Self-control is also something that's very important. So instead of reaching for what we in therapy call a maladaptive coping skill, that might be, drinking at the end of the night or drinking to unwind, trying meditation instead or physical activity instead, at least prior to indulging. This is a really important chart because stress affects parts of our bodies differently. However, for the majority of people that I've worked with, at least one of all of these symptoms has been tapped into by stress, and they have a primary area of their body where stress affects them, kind of the back of the neck, the lower back, the stomach, chronic headaches, skin breakouts. If you're having acne at any part of your body, you might have digestive concerns. Stress also affects your reproductive system, so you're not going to be able to conceive. And I know some couples I was working with over the pandemic, prior to that, they were planning for it and they had to stop treatment, and their bodies, they have shared, were also so stressed. They're glad that nothing had taken prior to starting or when IVF was started, because the stress of the pandemic alone may have caused an increased risk of a high-risk pregnancy. Your immune system is also very depleted when you're under chronic stress. This is where we see a lot with students around the, I would say if you're in a semester system, I teach at a community college, we're at 16 weeks. Around the 14th week, their immune system is really peaking, gearing up for finals. And it's like the exhale after their last exam. The next inhale is when they get sick, because your body and your white blood cells do such a good job of keeping you healthy the whole semester, ideally. And when you finally relax and your body hears that you don't need to be that stressed anymore, any illness that you've been trying to fight off is where you're more susceptible. So sleep, vitamin C, and making sure you're moving your body are really good boosters to prevent against illness, especially the illness that stress can affect. Joints and muscles, you can have aches and pains in your joints and muscles when you're stressed. You can have issues with your heart and your cardiovascular system, and you can have difficulty concentrating and anxiety and depression, like I mentioned before. So this is a handy chart that you can keep by you. And if you start to notice one or more of these areas are being effective, it may be stress and it may be time to talk to someone. So these are some ineffective reactions to stress. We've all indulged in at least one or some of them, or been fallen into them. Burnout is something I will spend quite a bit of time on this evening to educate you all and equip you with skills to prevent it and manage it. We can feel cynical, right? We have a low or negative view of the world or others. We can be very defensive. We can be very irritable and very quick to snap. If somebody asks us a question, if we're already on overload and it's too much, I'm not going to be my most regulated self. I'm not going to be able to communicate as effectively. Sometimes drugs or alcohol are used as coping skills. These are short-term relief, if anything, and long-term, they end up having a much worse effect on your stress because they negatively impact your sleep and the ways that you interact in your interpersonal relationships, which can lead to interpersonal relationship distress. And I know for myself, definitely saw a lot of my friends during the pandemic go through various waves. Especially if they had kept their job and transitioned both of them fully to work from home. It was a high stress household because you don't really have an escape and you don't have that standard break to come and go as you please. So meditation and mindfulness were at an all-time high when I was recommending when my friends would reach out and ask for how to manage their stress better. So we're going to transition into talking about burnout. And before I do, I just want everybody to take a deep breath because this may be the activating part of the presentation where you have some awarenesses about yourself and your life that you didn't have before. And just be kind to yourself. If it's too much, you can always step away from the computer and come back. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have at the end as well. So burnout is a state of physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual exhaustion characterized by chronic fatigue, weakness, low energy, and feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. It truly mimics depression or a depressive episode. If we strive for unrealistically high goals, this can also lead to burnout, and placing an expectation on ourselves that isn't realistic given our current situation can also lead to burnout. And being alive during a pandemic can also lead to burnout. The key is to recognize the subtle signs before they escalate or become out of control, and change the way in which you approach your school and work life, especially the balance that you have of the personal and the professional you. This is a non-exhaustive list of some of the warning signs of burnout. Whenever I give this presentation, there's usually 3 or 4 symptoms that most people can look at the list and recognize, oh, wait a second, that's me. That is actually what I'm going through. So if you find yourself having a really negative or critical attitude at your work or towards school, this is not uncommon if you are stressed or having maybe an episode of the acute stress that we mentioned earlier. But this is something that's more chronic and constant. Every class, even if you loved it and you had your favorite classes, would be something you didn't look forward to. You don't want to go to work, even if you do love your job. You don't want to go to work, especially if you don't like your job. You dread going into or leaving, going into work or going into school, and you want to leave once you're there. You might find yourself looking at the clock frequently. You have low energy. The old things that you used to get joy from no longer interest you. You might find yourself skipping school, skipping work, skipping friend functions that you might want to go to, or if a friend asks you to go to lunch, it's like, I'm just tired, I want to rest. Feeling empty inside, feeling like you don't have a sense of purpose. I think a lot of people transitioned through that during the pandemic and are still going through that transition, honestly. Being easily irritated by others, even how people breathe can be irritating when you have burnout. Feeling that your work or contribution doesn't make a difference and blaming other people for your mistakes. That's where that defensiveness comes in, the inability to take responsibility. And you're thinking of quitting work or school or changing roles or trying to muster up the courage to get back into working can also feel like just way too much to deal with. And I also have a chart that I included in just a couple of slides that breaks down each area of your body and what the symptoms of burnout are, so you can really have that as a reference for when you might be experiencing it. It can be intense enough to threaten your health, relationships, and career. It can actually be measured by special tests, and it measures your cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone in your body. It's produced by your adrenal glands, and it's supposed to protect you against stress, and it gets fatigued and literally burned out when the stress is ongoing. Your body does not function normally with that much cortisol. Cortisol can cause heart problems, and it can also cause rapidly increased weight gain as well. So this is the chart that I mentioned just moments ago. There are physical, emotional, and behavioral symptoms of burnout. Physical symptoms can look like feeling tired and drained most of the time, no matter how much sleep you get, frequent headaches and muscle pain. If you're noticing changes in your appetite, overeating or undereating, or your sleep habits, you're sleeping a lot, you're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, those onset and maintenance insomnia symptoms that we see, or lowered immunity that results in frequent illnesses or an activation of any autoimmune disorders you already have. Emotional symptoms of burnout include the loss of motivation, cynical and negative outlook, like we talked about. It doesn't feel as fun to go to work or school anymore, even if it's your favorite class or you love your coworkers. You have a decreased satisfaction and sense of accomplishment. Even if you do well on an assignment or get an accolade at work, it just doesn't feel the same when you're burned out. It's like a muted sense of life and vitality. You might feel helpless, trapped, and defeated. I know a lot of us, myself included, felt that way during the majority of the pandemic because you don't know when it's going to end and you don't know when the escape will come. You might also feel alone in the world, especially in that emerging adulthood, 18 to 24, and really up until 30. We don't really know who we are, and we're struggling with how do we be close to others, but also create a life for ourselves. And the last couple years have disrupted the ability to do so for many people. Lastly on this chart, the behavioral signs and symptoms of burnout would be ineffectively using food, alcohol, or drugs to cope, taking out your frustration on others, skipping work or coming in late and leaving early, withdrawing from the responsibilities that you have, or if you're a parent, having a strong desire to withdraw from those responsibilities but not being able to, isolating yourself from others, and procrastinating or avoiding certain behaviors that you need to do or certain tasks. This could be bathing, doing the laundry, washing your dishes. Everything feels like too much and I just don't want to do it for chronic periods of time. The societal and cultural impacts, I like to try and include like a diversity and inclusion statement in each of my slides, because a culture is defined as a group of 2 or more people with common traits. So you have racial and ethnic culture, you have your own family's culture, you have a school culture, your friend group culture. There are large cultural impacts on a lot of us that we are working through consistently, we're working through constantly, especially if you had to move home during the pandemic or you're trying to move out. The family system and the cultural system in which that you are a part of are going to change and modify the way that you view the world. So being mindful and being respectful that not every one of these skills or not every one of the boundaries that you can set are able to be set within a certain family system. That's something I like to make a note of. These are general skills to be used, and each person can cater it specifically, and that's why the Q&A is helpful afterwards if anyone has any specific tweaks or questions. As a society, Western society is very much set up around valuing production. We are largely a doing society. We are constantly doing, and we can feel guilt when we're not producing. Productivity guilt is what I like to call it. It can look like an inability to slow down on your tasks, constantly working almost like to a workaholic level, and feeling guilty when you're resting. One of the memes that I posted on Instagram recently is like sitting there because your therapist tells you to calm down. You're like, okay, but how can I make this rest more productive, right? There's this inability to just shut off the brain and be in the moment. And that's where mindfulness and meditation will come in handy. So I'm going to take a small break of the presentation before I go into the confidence and assertiveness skills. If anybody has any questions at the moment, before we dive into more the functional part of the presentation, you can unmute yourself if you want to join video so I can see you, and then I will answer any questions if anyone has any. No questions? Okay. All right. Let me get back into, oh no, here we go. All right. So my specialization in therapy is confidence and assertiveness. The skills that I want to teach you during the presentation today help you set boundaries around your time, boundaries around your energy, and boundaries around certain interactions with people that you will come across, whether it's family, teachers, friends, colleagues, etc. They're very helpful skills that I honestly recommend just taking with you for life. They're good stress management skills. They're also good relationship management skills. So the first skill that we will talk about is, I like to call it encouraging self-talk rather than positive self-talk. I like positive self-talk, but sometimes it can feel like a lie if we're not fully on board with it. So the skill that I teach is more about encouragement and duality, which I'll get to on the next slide. But before I talk about that, being able to recognize when you are in a negative self-talk pattern is one of the key skills of mastering adulthood. The 4 common thought processes that I see when we're using negative self-talk patterns are personalizing, blaming yourself for everything, or filtering everything through the lens that that's not fair. Why did they do this to me? How could they not have thought about me? It's a lot of your ego kind of throwing a tantrum is what it's called in psychoanalysis, and making it personal even when it may not be. Magnifying the problem, you focus on the negative aspects of the situation and ignoring any or all of the positive. So like we talked about in the symptoms of burnout, if you do get an accolade at work, but you're very burned out, you may not recognize it, or you may push it down of like, yeah, well, I mean, everybody gets those once in a while. So you don't really recognize the specialness of the accomplishment. Catastrophizing, I know I'm guilty of this. I love a flair for drama and I love it because I watch a lot of movies. But catastrophizing is expecting the worst, or you rarely let logic or reason persuade you otherwise. This could look like blowing something out of proportion and going to the worst possible case scenario, right? My partner didn't text me back, they're cheating on me or leaving me. I didn't hear back from my teacher, I'm failing the class. It's like this happens and boom, to what the worst possible case scenario could be. Polarizing is another skill or negative self-talk pattern rather that I see quite often in my therapy office. You see the world in black or white or good or bad. There's not a lot of shade of gray. There's not a lot of duality or being able to hold both and is what we call it. There's nothing between, there's no middle ground, and it can feel very chaotic, especially if we're stuck at everything is feeling or everything is brain-based, right? Chronic overthinking or being highly sensitive are opposite ends of the spectrum. The goal is to be in the middle and have what's called wise mind, where you're walking a middle path of emotion and logic, and you can step foot by foot and balance what you're thinking and feeling. A great way to do that is through encouraging self-talk. Self-talk is your internal dialogue. It is largely subconscious, and it's based on how your parents or primary caregivers, anybody who is influential in your life, spoke to you and spoke to each other, that imprinted upon you, and that has influenced how you think and how you talk to yourself internally. It reveals thoughts, beliefs, questions, and ideas. So if you tripped and you dropped something, what you say to yourself, either out loud or internally, that's an example of self-talk, right? Sometimes when we drop something like, oh, silly me, and then sometimes we say more profanity and we think that we're a terrible person and nothing's ever good enough and why me, this is the worst day of my life, right? That's self-talk. So encouraging self-talk begins by the power of and, what you are currently experiencing, right? I am currently feeling frustrated. I'm currently feeling upset. I'm currently feeling overwhelmed. I'm currently feeling incompetent. Whatever your feeling or emotion might be, giving it a label is a great way to tame it. Your brain now has created a real feeling and then can manage it versus the overwhelming emotion just floating all over your body. It can feel like a lot. And so you want to name it to tame it. I'm currently feeling or experiencing factually what the situation is, and that's okay. And I don't prefer it. And I know I will survive this. It's really allowing your brain to validate its own emotion as well as giving it a skill and a way out. So if you can think of a example that you maybe want some help with, you can either chat it in or just write a note. And during the Q&A at the end, I can help you if you're struggling to put the both and in play. So encouraging self-talk is a great skill to prevent burnout, because this is also something while you're resting, you're going to need to use, right? I feel guilty that I'm not doing anything right now, and I know I'm burned out and I need to rest. This is something I've personally gone through over the pandemic being a therapist. Everybody's turned to us and we don't have all the answers, right? We're trying our best just the same as you are. And they did not have a how to get through a pandemic class in my graduate school program, nor in my college at all. And so we are doing the best that we can. So there are times where I might need more rest. There are times where I know that I need to take the day off, and I plan that in advance. And I do feel guilty at times because I do love helping people. However, I know I'm not going to be very effective at it if I'm really burned out while I'm having sessions. So something I tell myself is I'm currently feeling guilty that I need to, tell a couple clients we have to skip, the next week. I plan ahead, and I know I will be a better therapist at the other side of that because I will have the rest that I need. So it's really giving yourself a lot of grace and using a lot of self-compassion. This is the first skill that I really want you all to take with you from now till the rest of your life, and tell everybody about it, because you learn more skills. You learn a skill more rather when you teach somebody else about it. This is a step-by-step system. You also have a worksheet at the end, so there's no need to take really diligent notes on this. I just want to walk you through the process of how to set and enforce a boundary with someone. There's a lot of talk about boundaries now, especially on social media. This is a really evidence-based way through research that we can talk to another person that keeps us regulated and increases the likelihood that we will get what we want while maintaining the relationship or friendship with the other person. So the set of skills that you'll put all together, the acronym is called Dear Man, Give fast. The objectiveness skills are the dear man, as you'll see on the presentation. This is when you have a specific goal that you'd like to accomplish. So when you're talking to the other person and you're trying to, I don't know, talk to your boss about getting the day off, let's say, or talk to your teacher about getting an extension on a deadline. You're going to describe factually what the situation is. You're going to express your emotion about it in a feelings-based statement, such as, I feel anxious, I feel overwhelmed, I feel grateful that we have this conversation. It allows the other person to join with you and listen to what your objective is. You are going to assert what you want. I would appreciate the day off. I need the day off. You flex wherever you feel comfortable. Assertiveness skills are learned over time. We're not just going to be master at it in one session. You're going to reinforce the benefit for the other person. If I'm able to get the day off, I can rest more and come back more effectively at work. You be mindful of their body language and your body language. Try to face them and stand tall and look them in the eye. Obviously, give them some breathing room and space. Even in an email, you can be mindful of your punctuation and how you're phrasing your wording to be effective. That's the really cool part about this skill, is when you write it out according to the worksheet, it's like the most effective email that you'll ever write. So it's one of my favorite skills and I use it constantly. You want to appear confident, and then you're going to be willing to negotiate or compromise. I totally hear that you want the day off. We can't give you Friday. How about Monday? Sure, that works, right? So you can be flexible and you can allow room for negotiation. The next skill, or the next part of this boundary setting, are the give skills. This is where you're using the relationship effectiveness, and this allows the relationship to still remain after getting your objective met, ideally. You're going to use a gentle tone. You're going to be interested in their side and what they might share. And they may share information that's incompatible with your need or your want. This is where the skill of validation comes in. But I really want you to remember to only validate what is valid. Let's say they bring up an objection. Well, I feel like this is just like 2 weeks ago, blah, 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 and they go off on this tangent. I hear you're feeling frustrated and I'm still going to need that day off, right? You circle back and use what's called broken record technique to bring the conversation back to the objective. And you're going to do this in an easy manner, no yelling, really calm, really just as I am talking to you all right now, very calm tone. And this is where practicing this in the mirror before you do it is so helpful. You can run through the script before you actually deliver it to the other person. The last set of skills in this setting and enforcing a boundary are called the fast skills. And this is where you maintain self-respect. You can do this no matter what your objective is. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So when you are maintaining your self-respect, you can be fair. You can also be kind. No apologizing unless there's truly an apology needing to be given. So no making yourself small of, I'm so sorry to do this. Oh, it's such a big deal, right? Don't make yourself physically small with your body language. And also don't minimize what your request is by trying to cushion it and apologizing essentially for existing. Sticking to what you value and what the values of the company that you work for, the school that you go to are, and being truthful. There's no need to lie or manipulate your way into getting what you want. If you do end up using that, it's not a skill that's repeatable because the other person may feel deceived. And if they find out that you weren't truthful, it reduces their view of, or rather their desire to give you what you'd want in the future if they ever found out. And it's just a good personal moral to uphold yourself to be as truthful as you possibly can. So what I mentioned just moments ago, you can always have self-respect at the core, and imagine your car has the gas pedal and the brake, and you're thinking about what's the most important thing. Right? Is my relationship with this person the most important and I'm okay if the goal isn't met? Or is the goal really something that needs to be met and I'm okay if this relationship isn't as strong afterwards? That will let you know which one to push the gas pedal on more. You can use all of the skills at once, but ideally, if you have an objective that needs to be met, like let's say my mailman was delivering my mail late all the time, I don't have a personal relationship with him. I wouldn't mind if I had a different mailman as long as my mail is being delivered on time, versus I need to set a boundary with my in-laws, or I'm talking to somebody that's a client about being on time to session. That relationship is really important. So I'm really going to use a lot of the gentle tone and validation and maybe not push as much on getting the goal met. So you get to decide based on your life and who you're talking to, and you know them best, which gas pedal to push. This is a skill to just have in the back pocket of everybody. I think we should all have learned this probably in kindergarten. When all other skills fail, and there's a ton after this that I will walk you through, or rather show you, you must learn to tolerate distress. Distress tolerance is not something I want you to use on a daily basis to cope with life. If you find yourself reaching for this skill more than once a day, it's time likely to start therapy or some other sort of practice that can keep your distress low on a daily basis. So there are times when pain or suffering or stress are unavoidable, and the best course is to learn how to accept and tolerate the momentary or acute distress. The ultimate skill of this module, when we teach it in a full therapy program, the goal is radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is accepting the reality of what is, rather than living in the fantasy of what could be or what should be. That's often what trips people up. So it's essentially like the serenity saying, or the serenity prayer as it's known in live form. You have to learn to accept the things that you cannot change. It doesn't mean you won't feel about it, but sometimes you have to bypass an emotion because feeling it is very ineffective, or it could risk a relationship or a job, etc., or an objective being met. By practicing your radical acceptance skills without being judgmental, that's where checking the facts comes in, or trying to fight reality, the client, meaning you or the student or whomever this topic is going to be addressed with, you're going to be less vulnerable to intense and prolonged negative feelings. So an example of this is if, and nobody can bend time, unless any of you can, then let me know. You're going to be late for a meeting or school, and let's say it's going to be 5 minutes, no matter what Waze, Google Maps, et cetera, tells you. You get to choose how you spend those 5 minutes. Do you show up? Do you spend them being angry and frustrated that you're running late? And then, right, the negative self-talk comes in. Well, that's not fair. I left on time and maybe you didn't. This person blocked me. This person stopped in front of me, right? A lot of blame, a lot of defensiveness. You get angry. You show up to wherever you're at flustered. Other people feel that, right? Or we walk in the meeting, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late, and it's disruptive and it's frantic. Or you radically accept, I'm going to be 5 minutes late no matter what. I do not like it and I can't change it. I'm going to Bluetooth call one of my friends and check in on them. I'm going to listen to my favorite song a couple of times. You control your reality. You really do, especially in your own mind. And it's a learned skill that you can practice over long periods of time, and no better time to start than the present. So the distress tolerance skill of radical acceptance is something I would highly, highly, highly recommend, especially while you're learning more about your own stress cycles and your own burnout management that you can cater towards yourself, depending on the phase of burnout you may be at, as well as using those skills to prevent burnout. So I've included in the rest of the slides some resources for stress management. There's a few more that I'm waiting for the worksheets to download to be able to add, and then it will go out to all of you who are watching this. So the resources are going to include talking about healthy eating and exercise, movement of your body, being able to talk about time management and setting goals. You have a chart in here for how to set SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So I'm going to do 5 minutes of meditation daily for the next week, which is another skill I recommend. Deep relaxation, breathing skills, and breathing exercises. These are some of the worksheets I'm waiting to download to add in. They teach you how to breathe with your body and have progressive muscle relaxation, meditation, and mindfulness. I recommend the Headspace app. It's one of my favorites. The voices on there are just so soothing, and they have some for any time of day. I personally do about 30 to 45 minutes of mindfulness meditation, and it's dramatically helped reduce my daily stress because I'm not carrying it constantly in my body. My shoulders used to be like glued to my ears, and now I feel much, much calmer, and I reach for that instead of any other coping skill, maybe exercise, but I reach for mindfulness and exercise the most now. And the best part is you even if you wanted to go on YouTube and you didn't want to pay for an app, there's a lot of free mindfulness out there, and you don't have to wait to see a therapist or to talk to anybody. You can start to regulate your nervous system, and this is something your therapist would recommend likely anyway. I also put in here different kinds of exercise. Yoga, these are research-based to help bring your stress level down. Again, free YouTube for yoga. Pilates. There's also free Pilates workouts. And then I think there are a few more exercise types and breathing types that I'm going to add in. But other than that, that is the end of the presentation part. And now I'm going to switch over to Q&A and check the chat. So if any of you have any questions, I am happy to answer them and happy to give you any feedback. We have about 15 minutes to do so. So just unmute yourself. And if you feel comfortable jumping on video, I'd love to see your face while I answer your questions. And I will leave it all to you. I'll be here.
Thank you so much, Talia. That's a lot of great resources and a lot of things that I feel like I didn't realize what different types of stress there are, but thank you so much for all of those resources. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, feel free, for anyone, if you guys want to ask a question, we have her here, so it's definitely worthwhile to ask any of your questions.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer anything, or if you need another resource, if something piqued your interest and you have a question about another resource, I'm happy to, if I can think of one on the spot, I will. If not, I will make a note to include it before I send the presentation out for all of you.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Say you do go through that burnout phase, and you do, I know you mentioned kind of taking frustration on others. What is the best way to explain to others that you're going through this burnout and this is why you're acting this way, or your emotions are this way?
That's a great question. And I have a follow-up. If you know them very well, or you find yourself, is it kind of like coming out on everyone, or is it specific family or friends?
Probably specific family and friends, just after they've been questioning me for so long, or yeah.
Have you talked to them before about it?
Not necessarily. Yeah.
Okay. So I would recommend, before it comes up again as like defensiveness or irritability, and when a time is calm and you're able to talk to them, it takes some vulnerability, and it's okay if it doesn't land well the first time, but letting them know, hey, the other day when, or the other month when, kind of reference the last time they may be able to remember when it happened. I just wanted to let you know I'm going through a stressful time. I took this presentation. I might be experiencing what I learned as burnout, and it wasn't my intention for it to come out on you. And if you feel the need to apologize, then you can. Or if not, you can just let them know I might need some space, or in the future when that happens, what I need is. And that's where you being able to identify, like sit with yourself for a little bit and identify, I need space, I need a hug, I need food, right? Whatever you might need, you can tell them in the moment. So that would be how I would recommend addressing it, both kind of to repair, and in the future, if it comes up, as calmly as you can, take the deep breath and let them know, like, hey, this is one of those moments. That's where code words can come in handy. If they're family that you live with or friends, have a quick code word that you can tell them, like, I'm at my peak level, and then they know to give you whatever you need, right? Like space or a snack or a hug. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course.
We have a question in the chat, Talia.
You recommend any sleep tools? Oh, yes. Okay. I'm such a junkie for sleep hygiene. What I would recommend is creating a sleep hygiene schedule that works for you. And I know sleep hygiene sounds weird, but what it really means is creating a system that you can have a good quality sleep, both like wakefulness is improved in quality and you're actually going to bed is improved. So you want to start with no caffeine 10 hours before your bedtime, because the half-life of caffeine actually lasts a lot longer than we might think, especially if you're sensitive to caffeine. And let's say you go to bed around 10, 11 o'clock, probably nothing around past 10 or 11 in the morning, just to really buffer it. Make sure that you're not being on your screens at least an hour, but ideally 2 before bed. If you must be for school, there's a really good app that I will put in the chat. It's called Flux. You can download it to your laptop and your phone, and it reduces the amount of blue light that you're getting, because screen time, not only apps release a lot of dopamine, so it gets you hooked on them, but the blue light itself keeps your brain awake. We're not supposed to have as much light as we do per day as humans, and technology has rapidly increased that. So definitely recommend reducing screen time, not using any drugs or alcohol before you go to sleep. It reduces your ability to go through your REM cycles, and making sure you're drinking a lot of water throughout the day can help with your digestive system. So that's not disrupting your quality of sleep either. And lastly, I would recommend doing some meditation in the morning when you wake up and in the evening when you're going to bed. So a lot of your racing thoughts can come to a close, and no technology in bed either. So if you have a TV in your bedroom or you like to watch Netflix before you go to sleep, don't do it where you're like falling asleep and then just pass out. You want to do that in a separate room so your brain starts to associate your bed for really only sleeping. And I can include a sleep hygiene part at the end of the presentation as well, so you can have slides on that too. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh. Is there anything you can do to counteract increased cortisol levels? Yes. So when you're looking at cortisol's effect on your body, this is where the exercise and the healthy eating can come in handy. And really, it can be life-saving. You want to be moving your body and getting increased circulation to all of your organs. And when you are increasing that like acute episodic stress, or you're having stress at a certain time each day, let's say you have a very stressful meeting or class to go to, or every so often during the week, exercise is going to help keep your body moving, your blood flowing to all the necessary parts. And then thinking of food as fuel can help balance and mitigate the negative effects of cortisol. So ideally not having processed foods, doing those infrequently if you must, and getting a balanced amount of food. And everybody has their own caloric necessary intake. So if you're able to maybe get like labs done at a basic level, or just kind of check in with yourself, like how well do I care for myself? If my body were a car, what kind of fuel am I putting in it? And how many times am I getting a tune-up? I recommend at least 20 minutes of exercise daily. It could just be a walk out in the sun with vitamin D. Vitamin D can also help keep your cortisol levels low because your stress is going to be lower. And vitamin D also helps with your immune system. Boosting your immunity can help lower cortisol too. So I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to unmute or add more in the chat. You are welcome to both. Does anybody else have any other questions? What is my go-to method for de-stressing while in an office setting? Okay, great question. My go-to method is, if you have space, I don't know if you can chat in, like, are you around other people or are you in your own cubicle or office? I will wait just a moment. Shared space. Okay. So if you're in a shared space and you find yourself overwhelmed or stressed, this is where the breathing exercises and the progressive muscle relaxation that I will add to the presentation will be effective. Everybody has to breathe. So what I recommend is something called breathing around the square, or square breathing. You don't have to have anything in front of you except your lungs. So you're just going to visually, you can either close your eyes or leave them open, and you're going to breathe in the pattern of a square. So it's like an inhale for 2 counts, exhale for 2 counts, inhale for 2 counts, exhale for 2 counts. And you do that until you feel your heart rate come down. You can also do the progressive muscle relaxation. So you can start in your toes or in your hands and you squeeze, and right, nobody can really see it. You can squeeze just for a couple seconds and release, and you work your way up or down the muscle groups of your body. What happens when you're stressed is your nervous system tenses up and you get anxiety and it has nowhere to go in your body. So use that physiology kind of against itself and decompress a lot of the stress. And if you're able to, just get up and kind of touch your toes and maybe walk to the restroom, splash your face with cold water. The diver's effect is something that's really helpful. Not many of us have like bowls of ice water available in our office, but you can splash some cold water on your face, and that can trigger a diver's response, which immediately calms your nervous system down. So I would say more of the silent meditation techniques, or if you can pop ear pods in and listen to one of those meditations on an app, that's the easiest way if you have a shared office space or even your own private office space. If that answered your, oh yes, of course, you're welcome. Okay, I always yawn during yoga and exercise. Do you have any insight? My question would be if it's causing you any distress, if it's just something you're noticing about yourself, then your body might be needing, we yawn for a few reasons. We either see somebody else yawn and our mirror neuron reactions kick in and we think, oh, hey, that looks nice. And we do it to get more air. But kind of like when dogs, I don't know if you've ever been around dogs or animals, dogs especially, when they're stressed, they yawn. So sometimes we're not breathing properly and we're holding our breath too much. And so your body's making you yawn as a way to try and get more oxygen. So there's not only a lot of cosmetic benefits to this, but also health benefits to learning to breathe through your mouth, breathe through your nose and not your mouth. And when you start to do that, it can regulate how much oxygen that you're getting. And that will help to reduce yawning and daytime tiredness, or even during exercise. This is also where that sleep hygiene comes in handy. Making sure you're well rested can also reduce the yawning. But if you're doing yoga, chances are your body is calm. And that's when it's like, oh, okay, I can just take an inhale and an exhale. Okay.
Thank you so much, Talia. I think we have about maybe one last question. If anyone has any additional questions that they want to ask, we want to be respectful for folks' time.
Any last minute questions from anyone?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
So if we wanted to start meditating, what would you recommend? Because I know that it might be, I tried meditating once and it just, I know you're supposed to to shut down your brain, but I was just thinking about like, oh, I have to do this, I have to finish this. And so is there any tips?
Mm-hmm. So there's two different there's probably more, but there's two different kinds that I like to categorize meditation into. It's like the silent meditations or music only. And then there's guided meditations where a voice is walking you through a specific wind down or calming exercise. So Calm app and again, Headspace is just my favorite because the voices are like so soothing. And I've tried a lot of them, especially during the pandemic. And that's the one that like works the best. So try out some apps. A lot of them give free trials. And if not, YouTube has some great channels and Spotify for free. But find a voice that's soothing to you that can give you a guided meditation of like midday stress or work anxiety. Mental Chatter are two of the ones I like on Headspace. And it's much less likely, even if you get distracted, it's much less likely that you'll get up and interrupt the meditation because you'll be being guided by another person's voice. So it helps to drown out your own thoughts when you're following somebody else. So I would recommend guided meditation and pick a voice that you like so you can stay focused. And just give yourself some time. Meditation is a learned skill. It took me a long time to be able to meditate, even guided for 20 minutes. Start with 5 or 10 minutes in the morning, and then 5 or 10 minutes at night before you go to bed, and just build it in as a pattern. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have any other questions, I'll include my website and my Instagram if you want to check it out or follow me for more tips on mental health. And I will give you all of the slides and the PowerPoint that will get sent out. I think we're able to do that. And yeah, thank you again. I really appreciated being able to present to you all.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Talia. Bye-bye.
Thank you.